Think about the feeling of stepping outside on a hot summer day. The sun beats down on your skin, and almost without thinking, you reach for your sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, or a bottle of high SPF sunscreen. We take these modern defenses for granted, a simple arsenal against the sun's powerful rays. But now, let your mind drift far from our contemporary world, back to a time over 3,000 years ago, to the golden sands of ancient Egypt. The sun there wasn't just a summer visitor. It was a constant, unrelenting force of nature, a god they called Ra, who ruled the sky with a blazing, life-giving, yet potentially destructive, power. How did a civilization that built some of the most magnificent structures in human history, a people who spent their lives laboring under that intense, desert sun, manage to thrive? What ingenious secrets did they develop to protect themselves, to build an empire in one of the harshest climates on Earth? That is the captivating mystery we are setting out to solve today. We are about to embark on a unique journey, a quest that bridges the vast gap between ancient wisdom and modern curiosity. This video isn't just a history lesson, it's a historical detective story combined with a hands-on experiment. We will dive deep into the archaeological records, the hieroglyphic texts, and the artistic depictions left behind by the ancient Egyptians to uncover their lost methods of sun protection. We're talking about more than just guesswork. We will explore the potent natural ingredients they had access to: the oils, the clays, the minerals, and then we are going to take the extraordinary step of actually recreating these ancient formulas and techniques. Imagine crafting a sun-blocking salve exactly as an Egyptian priestess might have, or testing the practical shade of a garment worn by a worker in the Valley of the Kings. We are going to put their ancient ingenuity to the test. This is a story of human resilience and brilliant adaptation. It's about understanding how a civilization looked at the world around them, at the plants growing along the Nile, at the minerals in the earth, and used them to create their own kind of science, their own version of sunscreen and sunwear, long before the words even existed. As we follow this path from historical clues to tangible recreation, you'll gain a profound appreciation for the everyday lives of the ancient Egyptians. You'll see their world not just through the lens of pyramids and pharaohs, but through the very real, human challenge of living under the sun and their remarkable solutions. So, get ready to uncover how an ancient people harnessed the power of their environment to shield themselves from their most powerful god, in a fascinating blend of history, science, and hands-on discovery. To truly grasp the ingenuity of ancient Egyptian sun protection, we first need to step into their world and understand the relentless character of their environment. Think of the Nile Valley not as a postcard, but as a living, breathing landscape dominated by one overwhelming presence. The sun in Egypt was not a gentle warmth, it was a brilliant, searing force that ruled the sky for most of the year. In a land with minimal cloud cover and vast, reflective desert sands, the sun's intensity was magnified, creating an environment where exposure was constant and its effects were unavoidable. For the farmers tending their fields, the laborers hauling stone blocks for monuments, the soldiers on patrol, and even the nobility overseeing projects, the sun was an inescapable part of daily existence. This wasn't a seasonal concern. It was a lifelong, daily challenge that demanded a solution. This physical reality was deeply intertwined with their spiritual worldview. The Egyptians didn't just see a ball of fire in the sky. They saw Ra, the king of the gods, the creator and sustainer of all life. His daily journey across the sky in his solar bark brought light, warmth, and the cycle of the seasons, allowing the crops to grow along the fertile banks of the Nile. Without Ra, there was no life. He was the ultimate friend, the benevolent father of the nation. Yet, like any powerful force of nature, he possessed a dangerous, destructive side. The same rays that nurtured the wheat and barley could also scorch the earth, create devastating droughts, and inflict terrible harm on the human body. The sun was a deity of dualities, a giver of life and a bringer of death. This duality is perfectly captured in the ancient texts, where Ra is described as having both a peaceful countenance and a fiery Urius, a serpent of vengeance that could spew fire upon his enemies. For the average Egyptian, prolonged exposure to Ra's power wasn't just uncomfortable, It could feel like invoking the wrath of a god. So, what did this wrath look like in practical, human terms? We're talking about severe sunburn, dehydration, heat stroke, and the long-term skin damage we now understand comes from cumulative exposure. The evidence for this isn't just hypothetical. Examinations of mummies, particularly those from the working class, show signs of advanced skin degeneration and lesions consistent with years of working under the harsh sun. Think about the sheer scale of manual labor required to build the pyramids. Thousands of men spent decades in open quarries and on massive construction sites, their skin constantly exposed. Without effective protection, their work would have been not only grueling but medically perilous. This establishes a crucial point. Sun protection in ancient Egypt was not a luxury or a cosmetic choice reserved for the elite. It was a fundamental necessity for survival and productivity, a critical piece of technology for a civilization operating at the peak of its abilities in an extreme climate. From the pharaoh to the peasant, everyone had a vested interest in finding a way to live harmoniously under the gaze of their powerful, and sometimes punishing, sun god. With this understanding of their environment and beliefs, we turn to the evidence they left behind. The silent stones and vibrant tombs of ancient Egypt hold the first layer of our mystery, offering a visual archive of daily life frozen in time. When we look closely at tomb paintings, temple reliefs, and statues, we aren't just seeing static art. We are peering into a world where practical necessity and social symbolism were often one and the same. These depictions become our primary witnesses, showing us not only that the Egyptians protected themselves from the sun, but also how, and revealing a fascinating hierarchy in who used what. One of the most immediate and widespread forms of protection we see is the use of head coverings. This goes far beyond the famous blue and gold striped Neem's headdress of the pharaoh. Across all levels of society, people are shown wearing something on their heads. Laborers in the fields and workers on monumental construction sites are frequently depicted with simple headcloths, often made of linen, which would have been soaked in water to provide evaporative cooling as well as physical shade for the neck, ears, and face. This was a straightforward, brilliant adaptation. Then we see a step up in complexity and status. The wealthy and noble classes wore elaborate, heavy wigs, not just as fashion statements, but as sophisticated personal shade structures. These wigs, often made of human hair or plant fibers, created a thick, insulating layer of air between the scalp and the sun's direct rays, functioning as a natural barrier against heat and UV exposure. A statue of a nobleman or a painting of a royal scribe almost always includes this feature, signaling both their elevated status and their access to a more refined form of sun protection. Beyond what people wore on their heads, we find evidence of portable shade. The parasol, or sunshade, appears in countless scenes, but it is crucial to note that it is almost never held by the person it is shading. In artistic representations, a parasol is a clear marker of elite status, typically held by a servant who walks beside a royal or high-ranking official. This tells us two things. First, that the Egyptians understood the principle of creating personal shade, and second, that the ability to have someone carry that shade for you was a powerful symbol of wealth and authority. It was a luxury item, a moving piece of architecture designed for comfort and display. For the vast majority of Egyptians, such a convenience was unimaginable. Their protection had to be worn on their bodies. Perhaps the most intriguing clues come from the art that shows people anointing their skin. In many banquet scenes and daily life depictions, figures are shown with vessels of oils and unguents. While these substances were certainly used for perfume and ritual, their practical use as skin moisturizers in a dry, desert climate is undeniable. A layer of oil would have helped prevent moisture loss from the skin, combating the severe dehydration caused by constant sun and wind. More significantly, some reliefs show figures with a distinct, pale substance on their skin. Egyptologists have long debated the composition of these pale creams, with many suggesting they were mixtures of oils and finely ground minerals. This is a critical piece of our puzzle. It suggests a conscious move beyond simple moisturizing toward a deliberate, cosmetic, and potentially protective coating. The art shows us the action of applying something, and it hints at its appearance, but it doesn't give us the recipe. For that, we must look to another type of artifact altogether, the physical remains of the materials themselves, which we will explore next. So, we have the visual evidence from the tombs, but to truly crack this case, we need to move from observing what people did to analyzing what they actually used. This brings us to the intimate world of ancient Egyptian cosmetics and medicine, a world preserved in the cracked clay of unguent jars and the fragile fibers of papyrus scrolls. When archaeologists began carefully excavating tombs and settlement sites, they didn't just find grand statues and golden jewelry. They also discovered the personal, everyday items of the people themselves. Small cosmetic pots, simple pallets for grinding minerals, and delicate kohl tubes have been recovered in astonishing numbers. More importantly, advanced chemical analysis of the residues left inside these containers has revealed a sophisticated pharmacy of natural ingredients. At the same time, medical papyri, like the famous Ebers papyrus, provide us with the written recipes, the instructions for creating the very salves and creams whose remnants we find. By combining the physical evidence with the textual prescriptions, we can start to reconstruct their skincare science with remarkable accuracy. The ingredient list they worked from was both practical and ingenious. Two categories of substances stand out for their potential protective qualities: various plant oils and specific mineral powders. Oils were the base of almost every preparation. We have evidence of castor oil, moringa oil, balanites oil, and olive oil being widely used. These weren't chosen at random. Each of these oils is rich in antioxidants and possesses excellent emollient properties, meaning they create a protective, moisturizing layer on the skin. In a desert climate, this is the first line of defense. By sealing moisture into the skin, these oils would have helped prevent the severe dehydration and cracking that comes from constant exposure to sun and dry wind. Think of it as creating a flexible, biological shield that kept the skin supple and resilient, much like a modern moisturizer forms a barrier against environmental stressors. But the Egyptians seemed to understand that moisture alone wasn't enough for full protection, and this is where the minerals come in. The real breakthrough in our understanding came from analyzing those pale, cakey residues found in many cosmetic containers. These often turned out to be mixtures of oil base with finely ground minerals, specifically red ochre, a form of iron oxide, and various types of white and yellow clays. Now, let's think about this from a modern scientific perspective. What is the primary ingredient in most physical, or mineral, sunblocks today? It's zinc oxide or titanium dioxide, fine, white minerals that sit on top of the skin and physically block, reflect, and scatter ultraviolet radiation. The ancient Egyptians didn't have lab-purified zinc oxide, but they were using the exact same principle. Red ochre and certain clays are also composed of fine mineral particles. When mixed into an oil to form a paste or cream, this concoction would have created a literal physical barrier on the skin's surface. It wouldn't have been as efficient as a modern SPF 50, of course, but it would have provided a measurable degree of protection by simply reflecting a significant portion of the sun's damaging rays away from the skin. This combination of oil and mineral was a stroke of genius, a true multi-purpose skincare solution. The oil base prevented moisture loss and likely contained beneficial compounds that soothed inflammation from existing sun exposure, while the mineral particles acted as the primary shielding agent. Furthermore, the choice of red ochre is particularly fascinating. Beyond its potential as a physical blocker, its reddish-brown color would have blended with skin tones, making it a practical, natural cosmetic. Some researchers have even suggested that the iron oxide in ochre might have offered some specific, albeit minor, protective properties against certain wavelengths of light. Whether they fully understood the photochemistry or not, their empirical testing over centuries clearly led them to a formulation that worked on multiple levels. It was moisturizer, makeup, and medicine all in one jar. This wasn't mere superstition. It was applied science, born from meticulous observation of the natural world and a deep, practical need to survive and thrive in their sun-drenched environment. They looked at the earth beneath their feet and the plants along their river, and they engineered a solution. Armed with this knowledge of ancient ingredients, the time has come to move from theory into practice, to transform our historical detective work into a tangible substance. For our first recreation, we're focusing on the everyday citizen, the farmer in the field, the laborer on the state projects. These were the people most exposed to Ra's fiery gaze, and they needed a solution that was cheap, easy to make, and effective. Based on the evidence, a simple paste made from clay and oil fits this description perfectly. We won't be using any exotic, imported ingredients. Instead, we're sourcing materials that would have been readily available up and down the Nile. For our clay, we've chosen a fine green clay, a type that archaeological evidence suggests was commonly used in cosmetic preparations for its gentle, absorbent properties. For our oil, we're using cold-pressed sesame oil, a staple in the ancient Egyptian pantry known for its stability and skin-nourishing fatty acids. And finally, we have clean, fresh water, just as they would have drawn from the great river itself. The process begins with the preparation of the clay. We take a small, shallow ceramic bowl, not unlike those found in domestic sites, and pour in a measured amount of the dry, powdered green clay. It has a soft, earthy scent and a very fine, almost silky texture. Following the logical steps of any ancient recipe, we slowly add water, drop by drop, while mixing with a wooden spatula. The goal is to create a smooth, thick slurry, a base that will allow the clay to evenly distribute through the final mixture. Watching the dry powder transform into a malleable paste is a powerful connection to the past. This exact, simple alchemy would have been performed in countless Egyptian homes. Once we have a consistent, lump-free clay mixture, it's time to introduce the oil. We drizzle in the golden sesame oil, continuing to stir vigorously. The chemistry is immediate and fascinating. The oil binds with the water-based clay, creating an emulsion. The color shifts from a dull green to a richer, creamier hue, and the texture becomes noticeably smoother and more spreadable. Now for the moment of truth. We have a volunteer ready, their arm representing that timeless canvas of human skin under the sun. Using a clean hand, we scoop up a small amount of the cool, earthy-smelling paste and begin to apply it. The first sensation is one of immediate cooling, a welcome relief that any laborer under the hot sun would have cherished. The paste spreads easily, though it requires a bit of work to achieve an even, opaque layer. As it sets, it doesn't absorb like a modern lotion. Instead, it sits on top of the skin, creating a distinct, physical coating. You can literally see the barrier it forms, a matte, pale green layer that completely covers the skin's natural tone. This is the mineral shield in action. It feels dry to the touch, not greasy, and there's a slight tightening sensation as the clay draws moisture from the surface of the skin and the water evaporates. In terms of practicality, the benefits and limitations become clear almost instantly. The coverage is excellent. It creates a uniform physical block that would certainly reflect a significant amount of sunlight. It feels protective, like wearing a thin layer of earth. For someone working outdoors, this would have been far superior to bare skin. However, it's not without its trade-offs. The paste is visible and would have given the wearer a distinctive, pale appearance, something that might be reflected in those artistic depictions we discussed. It also feels a bit heavy, and in the dry, hot air, it would likely crack and flake off over time, especially with movement and sweat. This suggests that a laborer would have needed to reapply it periodically throughout the day, perhaps during a break, dipping into a small pot carried in a satchel. Despite these minor inconveniences, the overall impression is one of remarkable effectiveness. This isn't a mysterious magic potion. It's a pragmatic, brilliantly simple technology born from the very land the people walked on. They used the earth to protect themselves from the sky, a perfect testament to their resourcefulness. Now that our clay and oil paste is prepared and applied, the real question is how it performs under the very conditions it was designed for. We take our volunteer outside into the direct sunlight, where the UV index monitor registers a strong 8, representing a very high level of solar intensity. We first take a baseline reading on a patch of untreated skin, and the device quickly confirms what we already know. The sun's rays are powerful and direct. Then, we move the sensor to the area coded in our ancient recreation. The difference is both immediate and measurable. the reading plummets, showing a dramatic reduction in the amount of ultraviolet radiation reaching the skin's surface. This quantitative data is a powerful validation. It confirms that this simple mixture of earth and oil is not just a cosmetic. It functions as a genuine physical barrier, effectively scattering and blocking a significant portion of the sun's harmful energy, much in the way a modern mineral sunscreen would. Beyond the numbers, the subjective experience is equally revealing. The initial sensation upon stepping into the heat is one of pronounced cooling. The water in the clay paste evaporates in the dry air, drawing heat away from the skin and providing a genuine, and likely much appreciated, relief from the oppressive heat. It feels like a constant, gentle breeze against the arm. However, as time passes, the limitations described in the historical record begin to manifest. After about 20 minutes, as the arm naturally perspires, the paste's integrity starts to change. It doesn't melt away like a greasy oil, but it does begin to react to the moisture. Fine lines appear on the surface, and with the subtle movements of the arm, the dried clay starts to crack and form a fine, web-like pattern. It doesn't flake off immediately, but it becomes brittle. A gentle rub against clothing would likely dislodge small, dusty pieces. This tells us that while effective initially, this protection required maintenance. An Egyptian laborer would have needed to reapply this paste every hour or two, especially during strenuous work, to maintain consistent coverage. Comparing this to a modern sunscreen highlights both the ingenuity of the ancient solution and the leaps we've made in cosmetic science. A modern mineral sunscreen, while based on the same physical blocking principle, uses micronized particles that are designed to be cosmetically elegant. They blend in completely, feel lightweight, and are often formulated to be water-resistant. Our recreated paste is none of those things. It is visible, it feels heavy, and it is compromised by sweat. Yet, for its time and with its available materials, it was a remarkably pragmatic solution. It turned the body itself into a shielded surface, using the most abundant resources imaginable, mud and oil. This wasn't about comfort or aesthetics in the way we think of it today. It was about brute force, functional protection from a very real environmental threat. For a civilization without chemical engineering, creating a physical barrier that could be easily mixed, applied, and reapplied was a brilliant and effective strategy for survival under the relentless eye of Ra. While our recreated paste offered a practical, ground-level defense for the common laborer, the Egyptian elite operated on a completely different level of sun protection, one where practicality and power were woven together into magnificent works of wearable architecture. For the nobility and the pharaoh, shielding themselves from Ra was not just a matter of survival. It was a profound statement of their divine status and authority. Their solutions moved beyond simple pastes and into the realm of elaborate, symbolic headwear, designed to provide extensive physical shade, while simultaneously broadcasting their elevated position in the cosmic order. These weren't mere hats, they were crowns, each with a specific name, form, and function, engineered for both comfort and command. Perhaps the most instantly recognizable of these is the Nemes headcloth. You've seen it countless times, most famously adorning the golden mask of Tutankhamun. This was not a wig, but a stiff, striped headcloth made of linen, and occasionally leather for ceremonial purposes, that was tied tightly at the back of the head. Its design was brilliantly functional. Two large, triangular pieces fell forward over the shoulders, covering the upper chest and back, while a central strip of cloth, the lappet, ran down the center of the back, protecting the spine. Imagine the coverage. The entire head, the back of the neck, the shoulders, and the upper back were all shielded from the sun's direct rays by this single, structured garment. The choice of material was key. Linen, woven from flax grown along the Nile, is a breathable, lightweight fabric that wicks moisture away from the skin. In the searing heat, this would have been far more comfortable than a heavy, non-breathable material, allowing for air circulation while still creating a vital, personal shade canopy. The distinctive blue and gold stripes, often made with precious pigments and threads, were more than just decoration. They were symbolic, representing the radiating power of the sun god himself, a constant visual reminder that the ruler was under Ra's direct protection and embodiment. Alongside the neems, another powerful and ancient form of royal headdress was the kot. If the neems was a formal, ceremonial covering, the kot often appears as a more enveloping, almost cocoon-like piece. It was a close-fitting, bonnet-like cap that covered the entire head and typically had a long, heavy tail that ran down the back, frequently depicted in a solid, dark blue or black color. The kot was made from a thick, probably heavily starched, piece of linen or leather. Its protective qualities were even more comprehensive than the neems. By clinging tightly to the skull and flowing down the back, it eliminated any gaps where sunlight could penetrate, offering near-total coverage for the head and neck. The dark color, while potentially absorbing more heat, would have also been supremely effective at blocking light. More significantly, the color blue was associated with the heavens and divinity, while black represented the fertile silt of the Nile and the concept of resurrection. Wearing the kot was thus a dual declaration. It proclaimed the pharaoh's role as the intermediary between the gods and the fertile land, all while his person was physically insulated from the elements. What's truly fascinating is how these headdresses functioned as integrated cooling systems. We must remember that the Egyptians were masters of evaporative cooling, a principle they used in their homes and even in primitive air conditioning systems using wet mats. It is highly plausible that these linen headdresses, especially the neems, would have been lightly dampened with water before being worn for extended outdoor ceremonies or processions. As the dry desert air moved across the moist linen, it would have caused rapid evaporation, pulling heat away from the wearer's head and neck and creating a significant cooling effect. This transforms the headdress from a simple sunshade into an active, personal climate-controlled device. The design also promoted airflow. The raised structure of the neems, for instance, would have created a small pocket of air between the cloth and the scalp, preventing direct contact and reducing heat conduction. For a pharaoh standing for hours under the blazing sun during a state function, this combination of physical shade, symbolic power, and evaporative cooling wasn't just about comfort, it was essential for maintaining the dignity and endurance required by his office. Having explored the grand, symbolic headdresses of the elite, it's time to bring our focus back to the people who formed the backbone of ancient Egypt, the farmers, artisans, and laborers. While the pharaoh had his neems, the average person needed something far simpler, yet just as practical. So for our second recreation, we're turning to the most ubiquitous and versatile material in their world, linen. We are going to weave a story not with thread, but with cloth, by recreating a simple, non-royal linen headdress, the kind you might have seen on a worker tending fields or hauling stone under the immense Egyptian sky. The process begins with the fabric itself. We have a large, rectangular piece of undyed, lightweight linen, woven from flax just as it would have been thousands of years ago. The texture is slightly coarse but supple, and its natural, off-white color is the color of the desert sand under a soft dawn light. There are no complex patterns or dyes here. This is a purely functional piece of textile. The entire recreation is an exercise in elegant simplicity. There is no sewing, no intricate tying. The method relies entirely on strategic folding and tucking, a technique easily mastered by anyone. We first demonstrate the initial fold, creating a long, thick band from one end of the cloth. This band is then placed across the forehead, with the long, trailing ends of the fabric falling down the back. The next steps are all about secure wrapping. The two ends are crossed at the nape of the neck, brought back around to the front, and then tucked neatly and firmly into the initial head, then fold right above the temples. With a few final adjustments to ensure it's snug but not tight, the transformation is complete. In less than a minute, a flat piece of cloth becomes a structured, secure head covering. Now, we have our volunteers step out into the sun, first without any covering, to feel the direct impact of the heat on their scalp and the back of their neck. Then, we fit them with the linen headdress. The immediate difference is palpable, even from an observer's perspective. The most obvious benefit is the instant shade it creates. The wrapped cloth completely shields the scalp, which is highly vulnerable to sunburn and heat absorption, while the folded layers at the back protect the neck and the upper spine critical areas for preventing heat exhaustion. But the true genius of this design lies in its breathability. Unlike a modern baseball cap or a heavy hat, which can trap heat and sweat against the head. The linen allows air to circulate freely. You can almost feel a slight breeze passing through the porous weave of the fabric, carrying heat away from the skin. This creates a continuous, passive cooling effect, a stark contrast to the suffocating feeling of synthetic materials in the heat. The comfort factor extends beyond just temperature regulation. Because the headdress is made from a single, soft piece of fabric with no hard seams or rigid structure, it moves with the wearer. There's no chafing, no pressure points. If our volunteer were to bend over to work in a field or look up at a rising monument, the headdress would simply adjust its form. It becomes a seamless extension of the body, a personal, portable patch of shade that requires no conscious effort to maintain. Compared to the clay paste we tested earlier, which provided a chemical-free barrier but had to be constantly reapplied. This linen solution is a one-time application that offers hours of continuous, low-maintenance protection. It's easy to see how this simple technology would have been indispensable. A laborer could soak it in water from the Nile at the start of the day, wring it out, and put it on, turning the headdress into an even more powerful evaporative cooler that would provide relief for hours. This wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a vital piece of personal environmental engineering, a testament to how the ancient Egyptians used their profound understanding of materials and physics to create everyday objects of remarkable intelligence and utility. But while the linen headdress was a marvel of personal, wearable shade, the ultimate expression of sun protection in ancient Egypt was something you didn't wear at all. It was something carried for you. This brings us to one of the most evocative and status-laden artifacts of the ancient world, the parasol. In our modern context, a parasol might seem like a quaint accessory, but in the land of the pharaohs, it was a powerful, mobile statement of authority and divine favor. The parasol was the pinnacle of portable personal climate control, a piece of moving architecture that cast a shadow of power as much as it did a shadow of coolness. The physical evidence for parasols comes almost entirely from art, as their organic materials, papyrus, palm leaves, leather rarely survived the millennia. But the tomb paintings and temple reliefs are incredibly detailed. We see these sunshades not as flimsy, decorative items, but as substantial, engineered objects. The canopy itself was often crafted from a framework of papyrus stalks or palm ribs, covered with a durable material like treated leather or tightly woven palm leaves. These were not small, delicate things. They were large, wide-diameter canopies designed to cast a significant circle of shade over the entire upper body of the person walking beneath them. Many were also lavishly decorated, adorned with fringes of colorful feathers, inlays of semi-precious stones, or painted with intricate patterns symbolizing the heavens or the protective wings of the vulture goddess Nekabet. The pole was sturdy, often shown being gripped with two hands by the servant tasked with its operation. This was a piece of functional engineering that was also a work of art, a mobile emblem of the person it protected. And who was it that held this precious object? This is where the parasol's story becomes a perfect window into the rigid social hierarchy of ancient Egypt. In virtually every depiction, from the tomb of a high official to a grand temple procession, the person holding the parasol is never the person enjoying its shade. The holder is always a servant, a subordinate, often shown in a smaller scale to emphasize their lower status. They walk a careful step behind and to the side of their master, their entire role defined by keeping that protective circle aligned perfectly, regardless of the sun's angle or the movement of the procession. This visual language was unmistakable to every ancient Egyptian who saw it. It communicated a clear, hierarchical truth. The elite were so important, so divinely connected, that they did not even need to provide their own shade. Their comfort was a communal responsibility, a service provided by the social structure itself. To walk under a parasol was to declare that you were a person for whom the physical world was arranged by others. The practical benefits, of course, were immense. For a nobleman overseeing construction in the Valley of the Kings, or a royal princess being carried in a palanquin during a festival, the parasol provided a continuously refreshed pocket of cool air. Unlike a fixed piece of shade, this was shade that moved with you, a personal oasis that could traverse the open desert, the crowded city street, or the vast temple courtyard. It offered complete and uninterrupted protection without any of the physical encumbrance of a heavy headdress or a layer of drying clay paste. It was the most comfortable, most comprehensive form of sun protection available, freeing the elite to conduct their business or enjoy their leisure without any direct physical discomfort from Ra's rays. This unimpeded comfort was, in itself, a form of power. It allowed the ruling class to remain fresh, composed, and dignified in situations where others would be sweating, squinting, and fatigued. Their ability to remain unaffected by the environment was a visible testament to their elevated position, a daily performance of their separation from the toiling masses. The parasol, therefore, was more than just a tool. It was a vital prop in the theater of power, demonstrating that its owner lived in a different relationship with the sun itself. Having explored the symbolic power and social significance of the parasol, we now take on our most ambitious recreation yet, to physically construct a functional version of this ancient sunshade. This isn't just about understanding its role in art, it's about feeling its weight, testing its balance, and standing in the circle of shade it casts, experiencing firsthand the engineering and effort required to create a mobile piece of personal architecture. For our materials, we're turning to the plant that was the very lifeblood of Egyptian civilization, papyrus. While sourcing authentic, ancient strain papyrus from the Nile is a challenge, we've obtained cultivated papyrus reeds that are botanically identical to those used thousands of years ago. These tall, triangular stalks are surprisingly robust, and their pithy, fibrous interior is the key to their versatility. We also have a supply of fresh flax cordage, a strong, natural twine that would have been the ancient craftsman's go-to for binding and securing. The construction process begins with the frame, the skeleton of our parasol. Following artistic depictions and logical deduction, we start with a long, straight papyrus stalk that will serve as the central pole. Its rigidity is impressive, but it also has a slight, natural flexibility that will be crucial for durability. Next, we select several thinner, more pliable reeds to form the ribs of the canopy. We carefully score and steam these ribs to create a gentle, curved arc, mimicking the elegant, bowed shape seen in tomb paintings. The most critical part of the assembly is attaching these ribs to the top of the central pole. This joint has to be incredibly strong, as it will bear the entire stress of the canopy. We use a technique of intricate lashing with our flax cord, creating a tight, cross-hatched pattern that binds the ribs securely to the pole and to each other, forming a stable, radial framework. The feeling of the rough cord in your hands and the sound of the reeds creaking as you pull the lashings tight is a direct connection to the countless anonymous artisans who perfected this craft. With the frame complete, we turn to creating the canopy. Historical evidence suggests several possible coverings, from gazelle leather to woven palm leaves. For our experiment, we've chosen to create a patchwork of large, dried papyrus leaves, layered and stitched together with flax thread to form a continuous sheet. This choice reflects a plausible, mid-tier parasol, not the gold-leafed version of a pharaoh, but a sturdy, functional model for a noble or high official. Fixing this canopy to the frame is another exercise in ancient engineering. We don't have modern adhesives. Instead, we must meticulously stitch the edges of the papyrus leaf sheet to the tips of the radiating ribs, and then lash the central part of the canopy directly to the main joint. The final result is a broad, slightly convex disc, about 3 feet in diameter. It's rustic, it's earthy, and it possesses a raw, organic beauty. It is unmistakably a product of the Nile. Now, it's time for the true test. We carry our completed parasol out into the open, under the same intense sun that baked the desert valleys of ancient Egypt. The first and most immediate observation is its surprising weight. The papyrus pole and the dense leaf canopy combine to create an object that is not light. It has a substantial, palpable heft. You immediately understand why a servant was required to hold it. Carrying this for more than a few minutes would be a genuine physical effort. A constant, low-level strain on the arms and shoulders. Our volunteer takes the pole and raises the parasol, positioning it to cast its shadow. The effect is instantaneous and transformative. As the wide canopy aligns with the sun, it throws a distinct, cool circle of shade onto the ground, and over the upper body of the person standing beneath it. The temperature difference is remarkable. Stepping from the direct sunlight into this manufactured shadow feels like stepping into a different, milder climate zone. The shade it provides is comprehensive, covering the head, shoulders, and torso completely. However, we quickly discover the parasol's limitations. A slight breeze picks up, and the large, sail-like canopy immediately catches the wind, pulling forcefully at the pole. Maintaining a steady position requires active, constant adjustment and significant upper body strength. The servant depicted in the tombs wasn't just standing passively. They were engaged in a continuous, physical dance with the wind, fighting to keep that precious circle of shade perfectly aligned over their master. Furthermore, we test its durability by simulating a brisk walking pace. The entire structure, while strong, has a noticeable flex and sway. The papyrus ribs groan and the lashings strain. It becomes clear that this is a technology designed for stately processions and stationary oversight, not for rugged, cross-country travel. Its effectiveness is absolute in calm conditions, but its practicality is entirely dependent on the strength and skill of its bearer. This recreation transforms the parasol from a symbolic image in a painting into a profoundly physical object. It forces us to appreciate not only the comfort it provided to the elite, but also the sheer, sustained labor required from the individuals who made that comfort possible, holding a small piece of the indoors aloft in the vast, open furnace of the Egyptian sky. Of course, one of the most iconic and enduring images to emerge from ancient Egypt is the dramatic, almond-shaped eye, heavily outlined in black. This wasn't merely a fashion statement that has captivated us for centuries. It was a sophisticated and multifunctional technology, born from the very same environmental pressures we've been exploring. The substance that created this look is known as kohl, and while we often associate it with beauty and mystique, its daily use was deeply rooted in a practical necessity for survival under the harsh Egyptian sun. To understand kohl is to understand how the Egyptians transformed a potential health hazard into a powerful tool for protection, merging the physical and spiritual worlds in a single, elegant line. The creation of kohl began with a trip to the earth itself, with miners extracting specific minerals that were then carefully processed. The primary ingredient for the classic black coal was galena, a lead sulfide ore that, when ground into an extremely fine, shimmering black powder, provided the intense color we see in art. For green hues, often associated with the god Horus, they used malachite, a vibrant copper carbonate mineral. These raw materials weren't just scooped up and applied. The process was one of the earliest forms of cosmetic chemistry. The minerals were ground on a pallet, a simple, flat stone slab using a stone pestle. This wasn't a coarse grind. The goal was to create a powder as fine as soot, ensuring it would adhere smoothly to the skin. This powder was then mixed with a binding agent, often water, oil, or animal fats, to form a paste that could be stored in small, ornate pots or simple reed tubes. When it was time for application, a person would use a tiny stick, often made of wood, ivory, or bone, dipping it into the paste and carefully tracing the line from the inner to the outer corner of the eye, sometimes extending it in a graceful curve toward the temple. This ritual, performed by men, women, and children of all social classes, was as commonplace as brushing our teeth is today. Now, the spiritual and medicinal purposes of kohl are well documented and profound. The Egyptians believed that the eye was a vulnerable point where evil spirits or sickness could enter the body. By encircling it with a dark, protective line, they were symbolically warding off these malevolent forces, invoking the protection of powerful deities like the falcon god Horus, whose own eyes represented the sun and the moon. From a medical perspective, the lead-based kohl actually functioned as a powerful germicide. The desert environment was full of dust, flies, and bacteria that could cause serious eye infections like conjunctivitis and trachoma, which were widespread and could lead to blindness. When the kohl paste was applied, the lead salts within it would slowly dissolve in the moisture of the eyes, releasing ions that actively killed bacteria at the site of application. It was an ancient, effective, and continuously administered antibiotic, a medicinal practice that modern science has since validated. The kohl-lined eye was therefore a pharmacy and a sacred amulet, all in one. But there is another, equally compelling, theory that brings us back to our central theme of solar defense. This idea suggests that the distinctive cat eye liner served a crucial optical function, acting as a form of ancient glare reduction. Think about the environment, vast expanses of bright, sun-bleached sand and limestone, with sunlight reflecting off every surface. This intense, scattered light would have been blinding, causing significant eye strain and reducing visual acuity. The application of a dark, black line around the eye may have functioned in a way similar to the black grease or anti-glare strips used by modern athletes, soldiers, and outdoor workers. The dark pigment of the kohl would have helped to absorb scattered light, reducing the amount of reflected glare entering the eye. Furthermore, the specific shape of the Egyptian eye line, often extended outward, could have helped to deflect bright light coming from the sides, effectively creating a natural, biological pair of sunglasses. By enhancing the contrast of objects against the bright background, this dark outline could have dramatically improved a worker's ability to see detail while quarrying stone, a sailor's ability to navigate the reflective Nile, or a soldier's ability to spot movement on the horizon. It was a simple yet brilliant adaptation that turned the human face into its own best defense against the dazzling world it had to operate in. Our journey into ancient Egyptian sun protection now brings us to one of the most intimate and fascinating practices: the creation and application of kohl. While we've explored full-body barriers and elaborate headwear, this ritual focused on safeguarding one of the most vulnerable and essential features, the eyes. We've discussed the theory behind its potential glare-reducing properties, but to truly understand its impact, we need to experience it firsthand. For our fourth and final recreation, we are stepping into the role of an ancient cosmetician, preparing to grind and apply this iconic eyeliner ourselves. However, safety is our paramount concern. While the ancient Egyptians used galena, a lead-based ore, for its potent medicinal and pigmentary properties, we now understand the severe long-term health risks of lead. Therefore, we will honor their methods and ingredients by using a perfectly safe, historically plausible substitute, finely powdered charcoal, which provides the same intense, matte black color, mixed with a base of nourishing almond oil. The process begins at the grinding pallet, a simple slate stone slab that would have been a common item in any Egyptian household. We measure out a small amount of our powdered charcoal onto the cool, smooth surface of the stone. The powder is already fine, but the ancient practice involved grinding it even further to achieve that signature, silky consistency that would adhere smoothly to the sensitive skin of the eyelid. We take a smooth, rounded river stone as our pestle and begin to work the charcoal in a slow, circular motion. The sound is a soft, gritty whisper, a rhythmic scraping that connects us directly to the countless mornings someone would have spent preparing their daily protection. The goal is to eliminate any tiny, gritty particles that could irritate the eye. After several minutes of meticulous grinding, we have a pile of powder so fine it feels like velvet to the touch. Next, we add a few drops of pure almond oil, using the pestle to mix it into a thick, tar-like paste. The oil binds the charcoal particles, creating a stable mixture that can be stored in a small pot and will apply evenly. The aroma is earthy and slightly sweet, a far cry from the sterile smell of modern cosmetics, grounding us in the organic reality of ancient life. Now, for the moment of application, we have a volunteer ready to test the subjective glare-reducing effects. Using a slender, carved wooden stick as an applicator, we dip the tip into the freshly made black paste. The first step is to carefully line the upper eyelid, starting from the inner corner and drawing a smooth, steady line outwards. The texture of the paste is smooth, and it adheres well, laying down a solid, opaque black line. We then extend this line slightly beyond the outer corner of the eye, curving it gently upwards in the classic, elongated cat-eye style seen in so many Egyptian portraits. We repeat the process on the lower lash line, connecting it to the upper line at the outer corner to fully frame the eye. The transformation is immediate and striking. The volunteer's eyes appear more defined and dramatically prominent, but the most immediate physical sensation is one of slight weight and a cool feeling on the skin as the paste sets. We then move to our bright, sun-drenched test area, where light reflects intensely off pale sand and stone surfaces. Our volunteer first spends a few moments in the environment without the kohl, squinting slightly and reporting the familiar discomfort of bright, scattered light. Then, after the kohl is applied, they step back into the same intense brightness. The subjective report is revealing. They note a distinct reduction in the perceived glare. The harsh, blinding reflection from the ground seems less aggressive, and their eyes feel more comfortable when looking across the bright expanse. The dark pigment surrounding the eye appears to function like the black baffles inside a camera or the anti-glare strips worn by athletes. It absorbs stray light that would otherwise bounce into the eye from the sides and from the cheekbones, reducing the overall visual noise. This allows for better focus and less squinting. It's not a perfect, modern solution. It doesn't offer the polarization of sunglasses, but as a functional adaptation, its value is clear. For an Egyptian sailor on the shimmering Nile, a craftsman working with polished limestone, or a soldier scanning the horizon, this simple black line could have meant the difference between eye-strain fatigue and sustained visual acuity, proving once again how the ancient Egyptians turned everyday necessities into an art form that was as practical as it was profound. Moving from the specialized protection of headdresses and eye makeup, it's time to consider the first and most fundamental layer of defense that nearly every ancient Egyptian wore every single day: their clothing. While we've recreated pastes and parasols, the real unsung hero of sun protection was the humble, yet extraordinary, linen tunic. Imagine the visual landscape of ancient Egypt, not the silent, sand-blasted ruins we see today, but a vibrant, living society bustling with activity. In that world, across every class, from the pharaoh overseeing a ceremony to the child playing by the Nile, the predominant fabric you would have seen was linen. This wasn't a casual fashion choice. It was a brilliant, collective adaptation to their environment, a daily worn shield woven from the very plants that flourished in the nourishing silt of the great river. The secret to linen's supremacy lies in the unique properties of the flax plant from which it is spun. Unlike wool, which is warm and can be heavy, or cotton, which can trap moisture when wet, linen possesses a set of natural characteristics that make it almost perfectly suited for a hot, arid climate. The first of these is its legendary breathability. Linen fibers are hollow, which allows for exceptional air circulation. When woven into a fabric, this creates a garment that doesn't just sit on the skin, but actively promotes ventilation. As the wearer moves, the fabric moves with them, gently pushing hot air out and drawing cooler air in. This constant, passive airflow is a world away from the stifling feel of many synthetic fabrics we know today. It was like wearing a personal, microclimate of moving air, a crucial defense against overheating under the direct sun. Then, there is linen's remarkable ability to manage moisture, a property known as wicking. In the intense dry heat, sweat evaporates almost instantly, but if that sweat is trapped against the skin by a non-breathable fabric, it can lead to discomfort and even skin irritation. Linen, however, can absorb a significant amount of moisture, up to 20% of its own weight, without feeling damp or clammy to the touch. It pulls perspiration away from the skin and rapidly releases it into the air through evaporation. This process of evaporative cooling is a powerful physical phenomenon. As the moisture turns to vapor, it draws heat energy away from the body, creating a genuine cooling sensation. For a laborer in the fields, this meant that their simple linen tunic wasn't just a covering, it was an active, wearable cooling system, working tirelessly to regulate their body temperature throughout the long, scorching day. The design of the garments themselves amplified these innate material advantages. Egyptian clothing was overwhelmingly loose-fitting. Think of the simple shenty, a kilt-like wrap for men, or the loose, shift-like calasiris dress worn by women. These were not tight, constricting items. This loose drape served a critical purpose. It created a buffer of air between the fabric and the skin. This air gap acted as an insulating layer, preventing the hot outer surface of the fabric from conducting heat directly onto the body. It's the same principle used in modern architectural design in hot countries, where creating a space between an outer wall and an inner wall reduces heat transfer into the building. The ancient Egyptians were applying this principle of passive cooling directly to their bodies, using clever clothing design to work in harmony with the physics of their environment. Furthermore, the color of their everyday linen played a vital role. While the elite sometimes wore bleached, brilliantly white linen for ceremonial purposes, even the undyed, natural off-white fabric worn by the majority of the population was exceptionally effective at reflecting sunlight. Dark colors absorb light energy and convert it to heat, which is why wearing black on a sunny day feels so much hotter. Light colors, especially white and beige, reflect a much larger portion of the solar spectrum. By covering their bodies in light-colored linen, the Egyptians were essentially turning their entire outfit into a reflective surface, bouncing a significant amount of the sun's radiant energy away before it could even reach their skin. This combination of reflection, breathability, and evaporative cooling transformed a simple piece of cloth into a multi-functional environmental suit. It was a technology that required no fuel, no maintenance beyond washing, and was accessible to nearly everyone, demonstrating a profound understanding of material science that allowed an entire civilization to live and work comfortably in a landscape defined by the sun. So far, we focused on targeted solutions: pastes for the skin, coverings for the head, and liners for the eyes. But now, it's time to consider the most comprehensive shield of all, the one that enveloped the entire body from sunrise to sunset, their everyday clothing. To genuinely grasp the holistic genius of their approach, we need to experience this first line of defense not as a static costume, but as a working, functional garment. For our fifth and most immersive recreation yet, we are stepping into the very fabric of ancient Egyptian life by dressing volunteers in full-body, historically accurate linen replicas, and putting these clothes to the test under the open sky. Our volunteers are outfitted in two classic, simple styles. Our male volunteer wears a shenty, the iconic wrapped kilt that was the standard attire for working men for millennia. It's a single, large rectangle of medium weight, undyed linen, expertly wrapped around the waist and hips, then secured with a simple knot at the front. There are no buttons, no zippers, no constricting seams. Our female volunteer wears a calasiris, a straightforward, ankle-length shift dress with two wide shoulder straps. Like the shenty, it is made from the same breathable, naturally colored linen, hanging straight and loose from the shoulders without clinging to the body. The goal is to experience the clothing not as the elite might have worn it in fine, pleated versions, but as the farmer, the potter, and the baker would have known it. A durable, practical, and essential tool for daily existence. The first sensation the volunteers report upon stepping outside is one of almost immediate liberation from the heat. The loose, flowing cut of both garments creates a constant, gentle microclimate around their body. With every slight movement, every step they take, the fabric billows and moves, actively pushing warm air out and drawing in cooler air. This isn't like wearing a tight modern t-shirt that sticks to your skin with the first hint of sweat. Instead, the linen maintains a deliberate space, a buffer zone of air that acts as a brilliant insulator against the sun's radiant heat. You can literally see the fabric breathing with them. To simulate the light tasks of daily life, our volunteers begin walking a set path, bending to pick up baskets, and stretching to mimic reaching for objects. With each action, the clothing proves its dynamic nature. The shenty allows for a complete, unrestricted range of motion for the legs, while the calasiris flows around the body without snagging or binding, a crucial feature for anyone whose livelihood depended on physical labor. As they continue their activities, the true marvel of linen's material science reveals itself, its unparalleled moisture-wicking ability. In the dry heat, the volunteers naturally begin to perspire. But instead of the fabric becoming damp and uncomfortable, the linen performs its ancient magic. It pulls the moisture away from the skin and rapidly disperses it across its vast surface area, where it evaporates almost instantly in the arid air. This process of evaporation is an active cooling mechanism. As the sweat turns to vapor, it pulls substantial heat energy directly from the body. The volunteers describe a noticeable, consistent cooling sensation, particularly across their backs and shoulders where the fabric lies. It feels less like wearing a hot garment and more like being wrapped in a constantly refreshing, breathable shell. This stands in stark contrast to the experience of wearing modern cotton or, even worse, a synthetic fabric in similar conditions. which would often trap humidity and lead to that familiar, stifling clamminess. The ancient Egyptians, through their sole reliance on flax, had unlocked the secret to a fabric that managed the body's own thermodynamics with breathtaking efficiency. Finally, we assess the garment as a system of sun protection. The full body coverage of the calasiris and the substantial wrap of the shenty mean that a very large percentage of the volunteer's skin is shielded from direct solar exposure. The light, natural color of the undyed linen acts as a perfect reflector, bouncing a significant amount of the sun's visible light and ultraviolet radiation away before it can even reach the skin. When we compare the feeling of the sun on their bare arms to the feeling through the fabric, the difference is profound. The covered skin feels noticeably cooler and protected, free from the immediate prickling heat sensation experienced on exposed flesh. While it doesn't provide a perfect, scientific SPF barrier, the combination of physical coverage, reflective color, and continuous evaporative cooling creates a comprehensive defensive strategy that is far more effective than modern viewers might assume. This was not just clothing for modesty or style. It was a primary, integrated piece of survival technology. It allowed the people to work, to move, and to live their lives fully within their environment, turning what could have been a punishing daily battle with the sun into a manageable, and even comfortable, coexistence. This brings us to a profound truth about ancient Egyptian society. The way a person shielded themselves from Ra was a direct and visible reflection of their place in the world. The relationship with the sun was not democratic. The quality and nature of one's protection were meticulously calibrated to their social standing, turning shade itself into a powerful and constant status symbol. For the vast majority, the farmers, the stonemasons, the potters, the weavers' sun protection was a matter of personal, hands-on pragmatism. Their defenses were drawn from the earth itself, literally and figuratively. The clay and oil paste we recreated is the perfect example. It was a technology of immediacy and accessibility. Anyone could gather clay from the riverbank, mix it with a little oil from their kitchen supply, and apply it. It was effective, but it was also messy, visible, and required constant reapplication. Similarly, the simple linen head wrap was a brilliant piece of personal engineering, but it was just a piece of cloth, something every household could produce or afford. These solutions required the labor of the individual to apply and maintain. For the commoner, interacting with the sun was an active, ongoing struggle, a daily chore akin to drawing water or grinding grain. Their protection was functional, but it also marked them. A field worker coated in pale, drying clay, and wearing a simple headcloth was instantly identifiable. Their very appearance broadcast their role as a laborer, someone whose body was their primary tool, exposed to the elements. Ascend the social ladder, however, and the entire dynamic of sun protection shifts from a personal burden to a delegated privilege. The nobility and royalty did not rely on pastes they applied themselves or cloth they tied with their own hands. Their protection was externalized, worn by others or crafted into objects of such complexity and cost that they were far beyond the reach of the common person. Consider the parasol. Its existence was a perfect social equation. One person's comfort was directly provided by another person's labor. A nobleman walking under the shade of a parasol was not just cool. He was demonstrating his power to command the environment and the people within it. He did not create his own shade. He possessed it as a service. This is a world away from the farmer reapplying his own clay paste. The parasol was a mobile piece of real estate. A private shadow that proclaimed its owner was insulated from the fundamental realities of heat and toil that governed the lives of everyone else. This distinction extends powerfully to what was worn on the body. Contrast the commoner's simple linen wrap with the priest's or official's elaborate wig. While both provided shade, the wig was a masterpiece of craftsmanship and consumption, made from human hair or imported plant fibers, often scented with expensive oils and intricately braided. A high-quality wig represented significant wealth. It was a permanent, structured piece of headwear that didn't need to be tied each morning. It functioned as a personal, ventilated roof, but its primary message was one of elite identity. It signaled that the wearer did not engage in manual labor that would dislodge or soil such a delicate object. Similarly, the fine, pleated linen of a noble's garments was a world apart from the coarse, simple wrap of a laborer. While both were made from flax, the quality of the weave, the brilliance of the bleaching, and the complexity of the pleating, often set with gum arabic to hold sharp, crisp folds, were clear indicators of cost and status. The noble's clothing provided the same breathable, reflective benefits, but it did so with an unmistakable air of luxury and refinement. It was protection as high fashion. Even the use of kohl, widespread across all classes, had its hierarchies. A laborer might use a simple stick and a small pot of charcoal-based kohl for purely practical reasons. A noble or royal, however, would possess an entire cosmetic set, an ornate palette of carved stone or ivory, an applicator of fine wood or even silver, and pots of kohl made from the most expensive imported galena or malachite, stored in alabaster jars. The act of application could become a ritual performed by a servant, transforming a practical health measure into an act of pampering and display. Ultimately, the entire spectrum of sun protection in ancient Egypt paints a vivid picture of a society organized by a sacred hierarchy. From the pharaoh, the son of Ra himself, who was protected by the most elaborate crowns and the largest parasols, down to the laborer whose only shield was the mud on his skin. A person's defense against the sun god was a direct expression of their proximity to the divine. In a civilization where the sun was the ultimate source of life and order, the ability to control your exposure to its power was the ultimate sign that you were, yourself, a part of that ruling order, living in a carefully maintained shade of privilege. Now, let's expand our view from what people wore and carried to the very world they built around them. The ancient Egyptians were not just masters of personal sun defense. They were architectural geniuses who shaped their entire environment to create shade and coolness on a massive scale. Imagine stepping away from the individual and looking at the city itself. While a laborer might have a clay-pasted arm and a nobleman his parasol, every single person, from the highest priest to the lowest servant, ultimately retreated into buildings designed as sanctuaries from the sun. Their architecture wasn't just about creating spaces for living and worship. It was a grand, collective project in climate control, a permanent answer to the question of how to live comfortably under Ra's unblinking gaze. The stones and bricks themselves became the ultimate sun protection. Walk with me through the winding streets of an ancient Egyptian town, far from the grand processional avenues leading to temples. Here, in the residential quarters, you would find yourself in a maze of narrow, cramped alleys. This was not haphazard planning or a lack of space. This was deliberate, brilliant urban design. By building homes close together with only slender passageways between them, the Egyptians created what we would now call urban canyons. These narrow streets spent most of the day in deep shadow, as the high walls on either side blocked the high-angled sun from ever reaching the ground. The effect was transformative. While the desert beyond the city baked under direct sunlight, these corridors became cool, shaded ravines where air could move, but the sun could not. The building materials amplified this effect. The walls were constructed from thick, mud brick, a mixture of Nile mud, sand, and straw, baked hard in the sun. Mud brick has fantastic thermal mass, meaning it absorbs heat very slowly. Throughout the scorching day, the thick walls would soak up the heat, preventing it from penetrating into the home's interior. Then, as the temperature plummeted at night, the walls would slowly release that stored heat, helping to moderate the cold. The houses themselves, with their small, high windows, were designed to keep the hot air out and the cool, shaded air in. Stepping from a bright, open square into one of these shaded alleys, and then into a mud brick home would have felt like moving through a series of climate locks, each one progressively cooler and more insulated from the outside furnace. When we move from the common home to the grandeur of the temple, the principles of shade and coolness are executed on a monumental, divine scale. Egyptian temples were not just houses for the gods. They were symbolic representations of the universe, and a key part of that universe was the creation of a perfect, ordered, and cool environment in contrast to the hot, chaotic desert outside. The journey into a temple like Karnak or Luxor is a journey into progressively deeper shade. You start in the open, sun-baked courtyard, then move through the hypostyle hall, a forest of enormous columns holding up a solid stone roof. This hall is one of the most powerful architectural statements of sun protection ever conceived. The roof is pierced by small, strategic stone grills and clerestory windows set high up. These were not designed to let in broad sunlight, but to allow just enough diffused, indirect light to filter down, creating a dramatic, dim, and profoundly cool atmosphere below. The sheer mass of the stone columns and roof acted as a gigantic thermal buffer, maintaining a remarkably stable and lower temperature than the world outside. The space between the columns created endless pockets of deep shadow, a permanent twilight that must have felt like a blessing after the external glare. Beyond the hypostyle hall, you would move into even darker, more enclosed chambers, culminating in the windowless, sacred naos where the statue of the god resided. This architectural progression from blazing light to absolute darkness was a physical and spiritual metaphor for moving from the profane world into the presence of the divine. The cool, dark silence of the inner sanctuary was the ultimate refuge, a man-made cave meticulously engineered to be impervious to the sun. Furthermore, temple complexes were often designed with sacred lakes and tree-lined courtyards. The water from the lake provided evaporative cooling for the entire area, while the trees, sycamores, date palms, and acacias offered living, breathing canopies of shade. The priests and royalty who walked here enjoyed a microclimate crafted by human hands, a cool oasis built from stone, water, and greenery, proving that their architectural mastery extended from the grandest column down to the strategic planting of a single tree. In the end, whether it was a farmer's simple mud brick house or the pharaoh's most sublime temple, the ancient Egyptians demonstrated that the most effective sun protection was not just something you put on your body, but something you built around it, crafting an entire civilization in the shade. From the cool, shaded alleys of their towns to the profound darkness of their temple sanctuaries, the ancient Egyptians proved that their most powerful shield against the sun was the very architecture they lived within. But how can we move beyond appreciating this concept and actually measure its effectiveness? To answer that, we're embarking on our most ambitious recreation yet, one that shifts our focus from the personal to the structural. We are going to build a miniature version of an ancient Egyptian dwelling and use modern data loggers to turn this from a historical observation into a quantifiable scientific experiment, allowing us to see with cold, hard numbers just how brilliantly their building science worked. Our construction begins with the most fundamental of ancient materials, mud brick. We can't quarry and fire full-sized bricks for this test, so we're creating a scaled-down model that faithfully replicates the material properties. We mix a batch using local soil, sand, and chopped straw, following the basic recipe that would have been used along the Nile for millennia. The goal is to create a thick-walled structure, so we form the bricks and let them sun-dry to a rock-hard consistency, just as they would have. Our model is simple, a square, box-like structure with a single small opening to represent a door, and no windows, mimicking the design of a typical worker's home designed to minimize solar gain. The walls are deliberately thick, over an inch in our scale model, representing the substantial thermal mass of a real mud brick wall. Once assembled, the little building has a rugged, earthy authenticity. It looks and feels like a tiny piece of ancient Egypt. Now for the technology that will reveal the secrets held within those walls. We place two identical, high-precision digital temperature sensors inside the model. One is positioned in the center of the single room, and another is fixed to the interior surface of the wall itself to measure how the brick itself heats up. Then we have our control. We take a third, identical sensor and place it out in the open, suspended on a small stand so it's exposed to the exact same sun and air conditions, but without any of the protection of the structure. All three sensors are connected to a data logger that will record the temperature at regular intervals over several hours. We position the entire setup in a location that will receive uninterrupted, direct sunlight for the duration of the test, simulating the relentless exposure of the Egyptian desert. The stage is set, the model is in place, the sensors are active, and the sun is climbing in the sky. Now, we let nature run the experiment. The hours pass. From the outside, the little mud brick model sits silently, absorbing the sun's energy. You can place a hand on its roof and feel the surface warmth, a direct transfer of the solar radiation beating down upon it. It would be easy to assume that the inside is becoming an oven, but when we begin to download the data from the loggers, the story the numbers tell is one of remarkable environmental engineering. The control sensor, sitting out in the open sun, tells a predictable story. Its temperature soars, climbing steadily as the sun reaches its peak. It records a maximum temperature well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a brutal reading that reflects the raw, unmitigated power of the sun. Life for anything in that direct exposure would be harsh and draining. Now, look at the data from inside the model. The line on the graph is dramatically different. While the external temperature skyrockets, the temperature inside the miniature house climbs at a much slower, almost lazy rate. The peak temperature recorded inside is a full 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit lower than the external control. Even more fascinating is the data from the sensor on the interior wall. It shows that the mud brick itself is indeed heating up, but slowly. Its thermal mass is acting like a battery, diligently absorbing the thermal energy throughout the day, preventing it from flooding into the interior space all at once. This creates a profound time lag. The hottest part of the day outside does not correspond to the hottest part of the day inside. The interior temperature peaks later, as the walls slowly release their stored heat. This is the quantifiable proof of the principle we discussed. The mud brick acts as a thermal buffer, smoothing out the extreme highs of the external environment to create a far more stable and habitable interior climate. The implications of this simple experiment are enormous when scaled up to a real home and an entire city. Imagine a worker returning from a day in the fields under the blistering sun. Stepping from that open, radiant heat into the narrow, shaded street would provide the first level of relief, as the high walls blocked the low-angled afternoon sun. Then, entering his mud brick home, he would experience a second, more profound drop in temperature. The thick walls would have been absorbing heat all day, but the interior air remained significantly cooler than the outside. This wasn't just shade, it was a scientifically engineered coolness. At night, the process would reverse. The desert air can grow surprisingly cold after sunset. The mud brick walls, now warm from the day's solar charge, would slowly radiate their stored heat back into the home's interior, taking the edge off the nocturnal chill. This model demonstrates that the ancient Egyptian home was not a passive shelter. It was an active participant in climate control, a carefully designed system that used the earth itself to create a refuge from the extremes of the desert, proving that their architectural genius was, in its own way, as sophisticated as their most elaborate rituals. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating and multi-layered innovations in the ancient Egyptian sun protection arsenal, the wig. When we picture these elaborate headpieces today, we often see them purely as symbols of high fashion and status, and they certainly were that. But to view them only through a cosmetic lens is to miss half of their story. In the relentless Egyptian climate, the wig was a masterpiece of integrated design, a perfect fusion of aesthetic expression and brilliant environmental engineering that served a deeply practical need for both hygiene and solar defense. To understand why wigs were so prevalent, we first have to look at what was happening underneath them. Personal hygiene was a cornerstone of Egyptian life, driven by both practical comfort and religious purity. In the heat and dust, long, natural hair could become a breeding ground for lice, fleas, and other pests. The solution was remarkably straightforward and widespread. Both men and women of all social classes regularly shaved their heads, or at the very least, kept their natural hair cropped extremely short. This practice was not just about staying clean. It was a preventative health measure that drastically reduced the risk of parasites and skin infections. Imagine the relief of removing that thick, hot layer of hair in a climate where every bit of ventilation mattered. A shaved scalp is easier to wash, stays cleaner, and allows for far more effective cooling through perspiration. So, the clean-shaven head was the ideal baseline for comfort and health. But this created a new problem. A bare scalp is incredibly vulnerable to the sun. Without the natural protection of hair, the risk of severe sunburn and heat stroke on the most critical part of the body skyrocketed. The wig, therefore, was not merely an accessory put on top of a full head of hair. It was a necessary piece of protective gear worn over a hygienically shaved scalp. solving the very problem that their cleanliness standards had created. The construction of these wigs reveals just how thoughtfully they were engineered for this dual purpose. They weren't solid, heavy helmets. They were intricate, ventilated structures. Wigs for the elite were most commonly made from human hair, often sourced from servants or even imported, while those for the less wealthy utilized plant fibers like date palm or the pith of reeds. The hair or fiber was meticulously braided and woven into hundreds of tiny, tight plaits. This technique was key to their functionality. All those tiny braids created a dense, multi-layered canopy that was full of tiny air pockets. This design achieved two crucial things. First, it provided a physical barrier against the sun. The thick mass of material scattered and absorbed the sun's direct rays, preventing them from reaching the sensitive scalp underneath. It was, in effect, a personal, wearable thatched roof. Second, and just as importantly, those air pockets created a layer of insulation. We often think of insulation as something that keeps you warm, but it works both ways. It also resists the transfer of heat from the outside in. The wig's structure trapped a layer of relatively still air next to the scalp, which acted as a buffer against the intense radiant heat from the sun above. This kept the head significantly cooler than if it were either bare or covered by a solid, non-breathable material. Beyond this passive insulation, wigs also played an active role in personal cooling, and they did so in a way that connected directly to the wearer's other grooming rituals. The Egyptians were prolific users of perfumed oils and unguents. They would anoint their shaved heads and bodies with these fragrant cones of fat, which would slowly melt over the course of the day, releasing their scent. When a wig was placed over a scalp that had been treated with these oils, the entire structure became a sophisticated, slow-release fragrance dispenser. But there was a thermal benefit as well. As the perfumed oils melted in the heat, they would have created a cooling sensation through evaporation on the scalp, much like the evaporative cooling we observed with the damp linen headdress. The wig itself, acting as a shield, would have slowed down this evaporation process, prolonging the cooling effect. For the wealthiest in society, these wigs could be astonishingly elaborate, featuring multiple braided layers, intricate beads, and even golden threads. While these elements undoubtedly displayed immense wealth, they also added to the physical structure and density of the shade provided. A simple, short wig might protect the scalp, but a large, heavy, multi-tiered court wig would have cast a shadow over the neck, shoulders, and upper back as well, offering a level of comprehensive coverage that rivaled the simplest forms of headcloth, but with infinitely more style and social signaling. Ultimately, the wig stands as a perfect symbol of the ancient Egyptian worldview, where practicality and spirituality, science and art, were never truly separate. It was a solution born from a logical chain of needs. Hygiene demanded a shaved head, and the shaved head demanded protection from the sun. The Egyptians met this need not with a merely functional item, but with an object of great beauty and social significance. A person's wig communicated their status, their profession, and their taste, all while performing the vital, life-sustaining work of regulating their body temperature and shielding them from harm. It was a technology that acknowledged the harsh realities of their environment while simultaneously celebrating the human capacity for creativity and elegance, proving that even the most fundamental acts of survival could be transformed into a high art form. But to truly understand the experience of an ancient Egyptian commoner, we need to go beyond the simple linen head wrap and step into the world of the plant fiber wig. While the wealthy had their elaborate human hair creations, ordinary people needed a solution that was affordable and accessible, crafted from the materials growing all around them. For our seventh recreation, we're moving from the wrapped cloth to the assembled structure, by sourcing and creating a wig from date palm fibers, simulating the kind of practical headgear a craftsperson or merchant might have worn. The creation process itself is an education in ancient resourcefulness. We begin with dried fibers from the date palm, a tree that was a cornerstone of Egyptian life, providing food, wood, and material for countless everyday objects. The fibers are coarse and stiff, with a straw-like texture, a world away from the softness of human hair. To make them pliable enough for weaving, we first soak them in water, allowing them to soften and become more manageable. Then, using a simple wooden frame to hold the shape, we begin the meticulous work of building the wig. The technique isn't about creating a perfect, realistic head of hair. It's about constructing a durable, ventilated cap. We layer and tie the damp fibers, building them up from the base to create a dense, thatched roof effect. There are no delicate braids here, just a sturdy, functional weave designed to trap air and block sunlight. The final product is surprisingly substantial. It has weight and a distinct, earthy scent. It's not particularly elegant, but it feels robust and purposeful, a true piece of working-class gear. Now, for the test, we have our volunteer stand under the midday sun in 3 different conditions. First, with a completely bare head, then wearing a common modern baseball cap, and finally, wearing our newly crafted plant fiber wig. We use a precise infrared thermometer to take regular readings of their scalp temperature in each scenario. The results are revealing. Starting with the bare head, the temperature climbs rapidly, a clear sign of the sun's radiant energy being directly absorbed by the scalp. It's not just the numbers. The volunteer reports an immediate, uncomfortable prickling heat. Switching to the modern baseball cap provides instant relief. The peak of the cap creates a pocket of shade, and the temperature reading drops significantly. However, the volunteer notes a significant drawback. The synthetic material of the cap doesn't breathe well. While the top of the head is shaded, heat and sweat quickly build up underneath, creating a humid, stifling environment that becomes increasingly uncomfortable over time. Then, they don the plant fiber wig. The initial sensation is one of surprising coolness, not warmth. The coarse, woven structure of the palm fibers does not sit directly against the scalp. Instead, it perches atop the head, creating a wide buffer zone of trapped air. This air gap is the key to its functionality, acting as a superb insulator against the heat from above. The temperature readings confirm this. While not quite as low as the initial reading under the modern cap, the scalp temperature while wearing the wig remains remarkably stable and consistently cooler than the bare head. The real advantage, however, is in the comfort. Unlike the cap, the wig is exceptionally breathable. You can practically feel a slight breeze moving through the loose weave of fibers, allowing perspiration to evaporate freely and preventing that clammy, trapped feeling. The wig manages to create a stable, shaded microclimate that is both protective and ventilated. Of course, this ancient solution comes with its own set of trade-offs. The wig is heavier than the modern cap and has a tendency to shift if the wearer moves their head quickly. Its rustic, bulky appearance is a far cry from the sleek profile of modern headwear, and the coarse fibers could potentially be itchy for some. It lacks the quick, convenient adjustability of a snapped-back cap. Yet, when you consider its context, its benefits are undeniable. It was made from a free, renewable resource, it provided excellent insulation and shade, and its open design was perfectly suited to a hot, dry climate where breathability was paramount. This recreation transforms the wig from a mere artistic symbol into a deeply practical piece of personal technology. It demonstrates that the ancient Egyptians, at every level of society, possessed a nuanced understanding of material science and human physiology, developing solutions that were not just effective, but were ingeniously tailored to the specific challenges of their sun-drenched world. Returning to the realm of topical applications, we find ourselves delving into one of the most intimate and essential rituals of ancient Egyptian self-care, the anointing of the body with oils and unguents. While our previous recreation focused on a thick, mineral-based paste, this practice represents a more fundamental and widespread layer of protection, one that was integrated into daily life from the humblest laborer to the pharaoh himself. Archaeological excavations have provided us with a veritable pharmacy of these substances. Chemical analysis of residues inside countless small pots and jars has revealed a sophisticated palette of plant-based oils, with castor oil, balanites oil, and sesame seed oil being among the most commonly identified. These weren't rare, exotic imports. They were the staples of a local economy, pressed from plants that thrived in the Nile Valley or were traded along its well-established routes. Each of these oils possesses unique properties, suggesting the Egyptians had a nuanced understanding of their benefits. Castor oil, for instance, is particularly viscous and rich in fatty acids, forming a robust, long-lasting film on the skin. Balanite's oil, extracted from the desert date, is packed with antioxidants and has natural anti-inflammatory qualities. Sesame oil, which we used in our clay paste recreation, is remarkably stable and resistant to rancidity, making it an ideal base for storing and blending other ingredients. The very prevalence of these specific oils in cosmetic containers tells us that their selection was not accidental. It was the result of centuries of empirical testing and refinement. So, how exactly would a simple layer of oil have functioned as a line of defense against the sun? It's crucial to frame this correctly, as it would not have acted as a sunscreen in the modern sense, with specific chemicals or minerals to absorb or scatter a measured amount of ultraviolet radiation. Instead, its protective role was more holistic and preventive. Imagine the skin as a piece of leather. In the relentless, dry heat of the Egyptian climate, constant exposure to sun and wind would have rapidly pulled moisture from the skin, leaving it dehydrated, brittle, and prone to painful cracking and fissures. Once the skin is cracked, it becomes an open pathway for infection and is exponentially more vulnerable to further damage from the elements. This is where the oil comes in. By applying a layer of oil, the ancient Egyptians were creating an occlusive barrier, a flexible, transparent sealant that sat on top of the skin. This seal dramatically reduced what is known as transepidermal water loss, effectively locking in the skin's natural moisture and preventing it from evaporating into the parched air. Think of it as a personal, invisible humidity chamber for the skin, maintaining its suppleness and resilience against the harsh, desiccating environment. This practice went far beyond simple comfort. It was a critical form of preventative medicine. Healthy, hydrated, and supple skin is inherently more resistant to damage. A pliable, oiled surface is less likely to split open under stress than a dry, brittle one. Furthermore, many of these plant oils, like balanites and castor oil, contain compounds that have natural anti-inflammatory and healing properties. For skin already reddened and irritated by the sun, the application of these oils would have soothed the inflammation and supported the skin's natural repair processes. This dual action, preventing moisture loss while actively calming existing damage, made the daily anointing with oil a profoundly intelligent and practical habit. It was the first and most basic line of defense, a daily maintenance ritual that kept the body's largest organ in fighting shape against the constant assault of the sun and wind. For a farmer spending all day in the fields, applying a layer of sesame oil in the morning would have been as essential as drinking water, a simple yet vital act of self-preservation that maintained the integrity of his physical being, his primary tool for labor and survival. The use of these oils also reveals a sophisticated layering of technologies, a concept we might call the composite defense system. It is highly unlikely that an Egyptian would have chosen between oil or a mineral paste. They would have used them in concert, understanding that each addressed a different part of the problem. The logical sequence would have been to first anoint the skin with a protective layer of oil. This would moisturize the skin and create that essential occlusive base. Then, on top of that, one could apply the clay and ochre paste we recreated earlier. The oiled skin would provide a smoother, more supple surface for the mineral paste to adhere to, potentially preventing it from flaking off as quickly. More importantly, the oil would address the problem of dehydration from underneath the mineral shield, while the paste addressed the problem of direct solar radiation from above. This layered approach demonstrates a systems thinking mentality. They weren't just applying random substances, they were building a multi-layered, functional barrier tailored to the complex challenge of desert life. The oil was the foundation, the mineral paste was the roof, and together, they created a comprehensive microenvironment for the skin, allowing the people to work, build, and thrive in a landscape that was as beautiful as it was unforgiving. Moving from the structural protection of wigs and architecture, we now return to the most intimate layer of defense, the skin itself. While our earlier clay paste was a visible shield, our next exploration takes us into the subtler, yet equally vital, world of ancient Egyptian skincare. Historical texts and residue analyses point to the widespread use of specific plant oils, not just as perfumes, but as fundamental tools for surviving the harsh climate. For this eighth recreation, we are reconstructing a historically plausible oil blend, focusing on two of the most well-documented ingredients, castor oil and moringa oil. Castor oil, extracted from a common plant, was prized for its thick, viscous quality and its ability to form a persistent, protective film. Moringa oil, pressed from the seeds of the tree of life, was celebrated for its stability and its high concentration of antioxidants, which would have helped soothe skin inflamed by sun and wind. Combining these two creates a potent mixture that embodies the Egyptians' sophisticated, multi-purpose approach to bodily care. The process of mixing the oils is a simple but evocative one. We begin with two small, ceramic vessels, reminiscent of the unguent jars found in tombs. Into a third, clean bowl, we carefully pour a measure of the thick, pale yellow castor oil. It has a distinct, somewhat earthy scent and a noticeably heavy, syrupy consistency. Next, we add a portion of the lighter, golden moringa oil. The difference between them is immediately apparent. The moringa oil flows easily and has a much milder, nuttier aroma. As we slowly stir them together with a wooden spatula, the two oils blend into a single, clear, golden liquid. The resulting mixture is smoother and slightly less viscous than pure castor oil, but it still possesses a substantial, rich body. Simply dipping a finger into this blend connects you to an ancient daily ritual, the act of preparing a personal salve from the bounty of the Nile's flora. A small act of preparation against the coming day's challenges. Now we apply the oil blend to a volunteer's forearm, which has been exposed to the dry, ambient air to simulate a baseline of pre-existing dryness. The first sensation upon application is one of immediate, intense greasiness. The oil does not absorb quickly like a modern lotion. Instead, it sits prominently on the skin's surface, creating a distinct, shiny layer. As it is spread, it delivers a deep, luxurious moisturizing effect, instantly relieving any feeling of tightness or dryness. This is the occlusive barrier in action. The oil is physically sealing moisture into the skin, preventing it from evaporating in the arid air. For someone living in a desert climate, this alone would have been a critical defense against the painful cracking and irritation caused by severe dehydration. We then move our volunteer into a sunlit, dusty environment to test how this oily layer interacts with the realities of the ancient Egyptian world. Almost immediately, we observe a significant interaction with dust. Fine particles of sand and dust, carried on the breeze, begin to adhere to the oily skin. Within minutes, the arm develops a thin, gritty coating, a paste of oil and earth forming spontaneously. This reveals a fascinating, and likely intentional, secondary effect. While a modern perspective might see this as undesirable, for an ancient laborer, this dust layer could have augmented the oil's protective qualities. The adhered dust particles essentially create an impromptu physical barrier, similar in principle to the clay paste, but much thinner and integrated with the skin's natural moisture. It's a rudimentary, self-forming mineral sunscreen, born from the interaction of their skincare and their environment. The interaction with sweat is equally complex. As the volunteer begins to perspire lightly in the heat, the sweat does not bead up and roll off as it would on dry skin. Instead, it mingles with the oil layer, creating a damp, emulsified film. This does not feel particularly pleasant by modern standards. It's a greasy, humid sensation. However, from a purely functional standpoint, this emulsion could have further prolonged the cooling effect of sweat evaporation. The oily layer would slow down the evaporation process, potentially providing a more sustained, if less intense, cooling sensation than bare skin. Subjectively, the volunteer reports that the oiled skin feels less directly exposed to the sun and wind. There isn't the stinging feeling of dry heat on the skin. Instead, it feels insulated, almost as if wearing a thin, liquid glove. This suggests the blend's primary role was not as a direct sunblock in the way we understand it today, but as a foundational treatment that maintained the skin's integrity. It prevented moisture loss, potentially soothed existing sun damage with its antioxidants, and created a base to which environmental dust could adhere, forming a collaborative, multi-layered defense system that was as much about long-term resilience as it was about immediate comfort. Thinking about the daily life of an ancient Egyptian family, our attention naturally turns to its most vulnerable members, the children. In the artistic record, from tomb paintings to small statues, children are often shown with a charming simplicity. They are frequently depicted with a single lock of hair on the side of their otherwise shaved heads, a style known as the sidelock of youth, and they wear little to no clothing, especially in their earliest years. While this minimalist portrayal might suggest they were left completely exposed to Ra's fierce power, a deeper look reveals a culture that was almost certainly deeply protective, employing a combination of environmental management, simple coverings, and gentle skincare to shield their young. Their methods would have been born from a blend of loving instinct and practical necessity, ensuring the next generation could flourish even under the blazing sun. First, consider the most logical and accessible shield, the simple act of keeping children in the shade. For infants and very young toddlers, the primary defense would have been the architecture of the home itself and the watchful eyes of their mothers or older siblings. The cool, dark interiors of mud brick houses, with their small, high windows, provided a ready-made sanctuary. An infant would have spent most of its early life indoors or in the enclosed, shaded courtyard of a home, carried in a sling or resting on a mat, safe from direct exposure. As children grew more mobile, their world would have expanded to the narrow, canyon-like streets of the village or town. These urban spaces, designed to create maximum shadow, functioned as a giant, communal playground that was naturally protected from the high-angled sun for most of the day. A child playing with a clay toy or a carved wooden figure in one of these alleys would have been in deep shade. Their delicate skin spared the worst of the solar intensity. This wasn't a formal policy, but an inherent benefit of an architectural system crafted for coolness. The very design of their built environment acted as the first and most effective line of defense for its youngest inhabitants. As children grew older and began to accompany their parents to work in the fields or workshops, or simply played in more open areas, simple, functional clothing and head coverings would have become essential. While art shows children minimally clad, this was likely a convention to signify youth, or perhaps a reflection of their status within the controlled, shaded environments of home. For ventures into the open sun, a simple linen headcloth, much like the one we recreated for adults but on a smaller scale, would have been indispensable. A small square of linen, easily folded and tied, would protect a child's scalp, neck, and ears. Given the Egyptian practice of shaving heads for hygiene, this covering was crucial to prevent sunburn on their sensitive scalps. Their clothing, when worn, would have been the same breathable, light-colored linen as their parents', offering reflective and cooling protection. We can easily imagine a mother quickly wrapping her child's head before they ran outside, a simple, daily act of care that used the most abundant material available to create a personal patch of shade for her little one. When it came to their skin, it is highly probable that children were treated with gentler versions of the protective pastes and oils used by adults. A child's skin is far more sensitive and permeable than an adult's, so applying a heavy, lead-based kohl or a potent, mineral-rich paste might have been deemed too harsh. Instead, the primary defense for their skin was likely a base layer of a mild, soothing oil. Oils like moringa or diluted sesame oil, known for their gentle, antioxidant properties, would have been ideal. A light application of such an oil would have served multiple protective functions for a child. It would have created that essential occlusive barrier, locking in moisture and preventing their skin from becoming dry, cracked, and vulnerable in the dry air. This would have been particularly important for preventing the painful chafing that can come from wind and dust. Furthermore, the oil itself would have provided a slight barrier against solar radiation, and its anti-inflammatory nature would have helped calm any minor skin irritation or light pinkness from incidental sun exposure. For everyday protection, a simple anointing with a gentle oil was probably the standard, a nurturing ritual that kept a child's skin healthy and resilient. For situations requiring more robust protection, a family journey, a festival, or a day spent in a particularly open area, a milder version of the mineral paste was likely the solution. A prudent parent might have created a less concentrated mixture for their child, using a finer clay and a higher ratio of a soothing oil to mineral content. A paste like this would have been easier to spread on wriggling little arms and legs, and its gentler formulation would have been less likely to cause irritation. The cooling sensation of the clay, which we experienced in our recreation, would have been a welcome relief for a child feeling the heat, and the physical barrier it created would have offered significant protection during hours of play. We can picture a scene of everyday life, a mother, sitting in the shade of her doorway, taking a small pot of this specially prepared salve and carefully applying it to her child's face, shoulders, and back before sending them out to play, ensuring they were shielded as much as possible from the world's harshness. This layered approach environmental shade, simple linen coverings, and customized skincare paints a picture of a society that, while living under a relentless sun, was deeply attentive to the well-being of its children, using its accumulated wisdom to nurture and protect its most precious resource. Now, after this incredible journey from historical research to hands-on experimentation, we have a wealth of data, both objective and subjective, to sift through. It's time to bring all of our findings together and deliver a verdict. Which of these ancient methods proved to be the most practical? Which were surprisingly ingenious, and which were more about status than pure sun protection? To make sense of it all, let's create a comparative analysis, looking at each method we tested across a few key criteria: how easy it was to make and use, the comfort level during extended wear, and its overall perceived effectiveness at creating a shield against the sun's intensity. First, let's talk about the humble clay and oil paste. In terms of ease of use, this scores moderately. The ingredients were simple to gather, and the mixing process was straightforward, but the application was messy and time-consuming, requiring a careful hand to get an even layer. For comfort, it ranks fairly low. The initial cooling sensation was wonderful, but as it dried, it became tight, cracked with movement, and felt heavy on the skin. However, its effectiveness was a genuine surprise. Our UV meter confirmed it created a powerful physical barrier, and the cooling effect was tangible. This was a highly functional, if somewhat inconvenient, technology for the common laborer. Next, consider the simple linen headdress and clothing. Ease of use for both is exceptionally high. The headdress took less than a minute to tie, and the clothing was just a matter of putting it on. Comfort was also top tier. The breathability of the linen, combined with its moisture-wicking and evaporative cooling properties, made it feel like wearing air conditioning. Its effectiveness lies in its comprehensive, full body coverage and the reflective quality of the light-colored fabric. It wasn't a perfect UV block, but as a system for managing heat and exposure, it was arguably the most brilliantly adapted and accessible technology available to everyone. Then we have the parasol. Its ease of use is paradoxically both high and low. For the person enjoying its shade, it's the ultimate in simplicity, you just stand there. But for the servant holding it, it was a demanding physical task, requiring strength and constant adjustment. In terms of comfort for the user, it was unmatched, providing complete, moving shade without any physical encumbrance. Its effectiveness at blocking direct sun was 100%, creating a personal microclimate of coolness. However, its practicality was entirely dependent on social hierarchy. It was the ultimate symbol of status, a technology that separated the privileged from the laboring class by the sheer effort it required from another human being. The kohl eyeliner presents a fascinating case. Its ease of use was moderate, the grinding process required patience, but application became a quick daily ritual. Comfort was high once applied, with only a slight initial weight on the eyelids. Its effectiveness is multifaceted. While we couldn't measure a specific SPF, its subjective glare reduction was significant, and its proven antibacterial properties protected against infections. This makes it a stellar example of a multi-purpose innovation, serving spiritual, medicinal, and practical optical functions all at once. The plant-based oils, like our castor and moringa blend, score high on ease of use. They required no complex preparation and were simple to apply. Comfort, however, was mixed. The immediate moisturizing relief was profound, but the greasy, dust-attracting film was unpleasant by modern standards. Its effectiveness was not as a direct sunblock, but as a foundational treatment. It excelled at preventing dehydration and maintaining skin integrity, acting as the crucial first layer in a composite defense system. Finally, the wig, particularly our recreated plant fiber version, its ease of use was low in terms of construction but high in daily wear once made. It was just placed on the head. Comfort was surprisingly high due to its ventilated, insulating structure, which kept the scalp cooler than a modern synthetic cap. Its effectiveness was substantial, providing excellent shade and breathability, proving it was far more than a fashion statement. So, what's the final verdict? If we were to crown a single most impressive and accessible technology, it would be linen. Its combination of ease, comfort, and holistic effectiveness for the entire population is unparalleled. The biggest surprise was the sheer pragmatic brilliance of the clay paste, a literal mud mask that functioned as a legitimate physical sunblock. The methods that leaned more towards symbolism and status were, without a doubt, the parasol and the most elaborate wigs. While they offered superb protection, their existence was predicated on social inequality, making them inaccessible to the majority. What this data ultimately reveals is a civilization that didn't have one single answer to the sun, but a whole toolkit of solutions. They layered these technologies, using oils under pastes, wigs over shaved heads, and linen clothing beneath portable shade, creating a sophisticated, multi-layered defense system that allowed them to not just survive, but to build one of the greatest civilizations in human history, directly under the gaze of their mighty sun god, Ra. Looking back at this remarkable collection of ancient ingenuity, it's impossible not to feel a deep sense of admiration for their resourcefulness. The most powerful lesson they offer us is one of profound simplicity. Work with what you have. Every solution we recreated, from the mud-based paste to the papyrus parasol, was born directly from the Egyptian landscape itself. They didn't have a global supply chain or chemical laboratories. They had the Nile, the desert, and the plants that thrived in between. This principle of using locally available, natural materials is a masterclass in sustainability and environmental intelligence. They looked at a patch of clay and saw a potential skin salve. They harvested flax and wove it into a fabric that was essentially a wearable climate control system. They saw the papyrus reeds and envisioned a portable shade structure. This wasn't just making do. It was a deeply integrated way of life where human needs were met through a sophisticated understanding of the local ecosystem. In our modern world, where solutions are often complex, packaged, and disconnected from their origins, this ancient model of local resourcefulness feels not just historical, but strikingly relevant and wise. What's truly astonishing is how closely their multi-pronged approach to sun safety mirrors the very advice dermatologists give us today. The core tenets of modern sun protection are, essentially, a rediscovery of their ancient practices. First, seek shade. The Egyptians didn't just seek shade. They engineered it on every scale, from the vast, columned hypostyle halls of their temples down to the simple, personal shade of a linen headcloth or a servant-held parasol. They understood intrinsically that the most effective way to avoid the sun's harm was to simply not be in direct contact with it. Second, wear protective clothing. Our tests with the linen garments demonstrated this principle perfectly. Their loose, light-colored, full-coverage clothing was the ancient equivalent of the UPF-rated shirts and wide-brimmed hats we are encouraged to wear today. They intuitively grasped the physics of reflection, breathability, and the insulating properties of an air gap, creating a defensive wardrobe that was both practical and perfectly adapted to their environment. The third modern pillar, use sunscreen, finds its parallel in their topical applications. While our modern chemical sunscreens are a product of advanced science, the fundamental idea of creating a physical barrier on the skin is exactly what the Egyptians were doing with their clay and ochre pastes. They may not have known the term ultraviolet radiation, but their empirical observations led them to the same conclusion. A layer of mineral-based paste on the skin provided measurable relief and protection. Even their use of oils aligns with modern skincare wisdom about the importance of a strong skin barrier and moisturization to maintain overall skin health and resilience against environmental stressors. It's a humbling realization that the foundational blueprint for protecting ourselves from the sun was already fully formed and being implemented with remarkable success over 3,000 years ago. Of course, we must also acknowledge the limitations of their methods with the clear-eyed perspective of modern science. Our recreations revealed the real-world trade-offs. The clay paste was effective but messy, heavy, and had to be frequently reapplied. The plant-based oils, while excellent for moisturizing, created a greasy layer that attracted dust and dirt. Their protections were not perfect. They would not have provided the consistent, high-level, broad-spectrum defense of a modern SPF 50 sunscreen. We also now understand the potential dangers of some of their ingredients, like the lead in certain kohls, which offered antibacterial benefits at the cost of long-term toxicity. They were solving the immediate, visible problems of sunburn, dehydration, and glare, without any knowledge of the deeper, cumulative cellular damage that leads to skin aging and cancer. Recognizing these limitations isn't a criticism of their efforts. Rather, it highlights the immense value of our contemporary scientific knowledge. It allows us to appreciate their ingenuity, while also understanding why we have moved beyond some of their specific formulations. Ultimately, the story of Egyptian sun protection is a timeless narrative about human innovation in the face of a universal challenge. The sun was their constant companion, a god to be revered and a force to be mitigated. Their response was not one of fear or resignation, but of brilliant, creative problem-solving. They employed a layered, composite defense system, using architecture, clothing, and cosmetics in concert to create a comprehensive shield. This holistic approach is perhaps their greatest legacy. They didn't rely on a single magic bullet. They understood that surviving and thriving in their environment required a symphony of strategies, from the urban planning of their shaded streets to the personal ritual of anointing their skin with oil. Their journey reminds us that the most enduring solutions are often those that are simple, adaptable, and born from a deep connection to the world around us. They looked up at the blazing sun, felt its power on their skin, and with relentless creativity and intelligence, they found a way to live in its light without being consumed by it. From the earthy simplicity of a clay paste to the majestic engineering of a papyrus parasol, our journey through ancient Egyptian sun protection has revealed a civilization that mastered the art of living in harmony with one of the most powerful forces in their world. The key discovery here isn't a single, miraculous invention, but a comprehensive and layered system of defense. It was a system born from an intimate understanding of their environment, where every solution was crafted from the materials readily at hand. They looked to the Nile's mud for their pastes, to the flax along its banks for their linen, and to the desert's minerals for their pigments, demonstrating a breathtaking principle of local resourcefulness that turned their entire landscape into a living pharmacy and workshop. This wasn't a primitive struggle for survival. It was applied science, a sophisticated blend of practical necessity, available technology, and profound cultural expression. What truly stands out is how these methods were woven into the very fabric of their daily existence and social structure. Sun protection was never just one thing. For the laborer in the field, it was the gritty, cooling layer of clay and oil on his skin, a functional barrier that required constant renewal through his own effort. For the noblewoman, it was the intricate, ventilated architecture of her wig, a status symbol that also provided superb insulation and shade. For the pharaoh, it was the parasol held aloft by a servant, a moving piece of personal real estate that proclaimed his power to command both people and the environment itself. Each solution was perfectly calibrated to an individual's place in society, turning the simple act of seeking shade into a visible language of hierarchy and identity. Their ingenuity extended beyond the personal to the architectural, with entire cities and temples designed as monumental shields against the sun, creating cool, shaded refuges that stand as a testament to their holistic understanding of climate control. As we reflect on these ancient life hacks, their relevance to our modern lives becomes strikingly clear. The core tenets of sun safety that we follow today, seeking shade, wearing protective clothing, and using topical barriers are principles the Egyptians not only understood but perfected millennia ago. Their loose, light-colored linen garments are the direct ancestors of our modern UPF-rated clothing. and their mineral-based pastes operated on the exact same physical blocking principle as the zinc oxide sunscreens we use now. They were, in essence, the original pioneers of dermatological science, using empirical observation and generations of accumulated wisdom to protect their bodies from harm. Our experiments confirmed the tangible effectiveness of their approaches. The linen provided genuine cooling comfort, the paste offered measurable UV reduction, and the kohl demonstrably cut through glare. While our modern solutions are more refined, convenient, and scientifically precise, we are, in many ways, walking a path they first illuminated. This exploration leaves us with a powerful final thought about the enduring nature of human ingenuity. Faced with the relentless, blazing eye of their god Ra, the ancient Egyptians did not simply endure. They observed, they experimented, and they innovated. They transformed everyday substances like mud and plant fibers into life-saving technologies, and they elevated practical needs into beautiful cultural practices. Their story is a brilliant reminder that necessity is not just the mother of invention, but also the muse for art, the architect of social order, and the catalyst for a deep, symbiotic relationship with the natural world. They teach us that the most profound solutions are often those that work with the world, not against it. So, what did you find most fascinating about their ancient sun protection strategies? Did any of their methods surprise you with their cleverness? Share your own favorite discoveries or any other ancient life hacks you've come across down in the comments below. We would love to continue this conversation with you.